Hello and welcome to the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, a place for conversation about travel, adventure, life lessons and making the most out of each and every day. I'm your host Alistair Green, and each week I will have a conversation with someone who will not only inspire us all, but give us an insight into living life to its fullest. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, Whole Earth Provision Company. Since 1970, Whole Earth Provision Company has been the Texas outfitter for side quests big and small. Whether you're gearing up for the open road, chasing a trailhead, or hunting for that just right gift, they have got you covered. Think durable clothing, shoes that will actually go the distance, gear that's road trip ready, and books, puzzles and toys that will spark wonder at every age. You'll find Whole Earth in Dallas, Austin, Houston and San Antonio, or anytime online at wholeearthprovision.com. And hey, because you're rolling with the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, here's a little extra love. Use the code OutdoorsyEDU for 20% off your next adventure at Whole Earth. After attending Harvard to study architecture, this week's guest's life was altered permanently by reading a book on education and realised teaching was where she wanted to be. Katy Purviance blazed a trail and became a world-travelling English teacher, and discovered her true calling wasn't in blueprints but in building new ways of learning. Today she is redefining education in Oregon with a self-directed, outdoors-first co-op that's as inspiring as the journey that brought her here. Okay, and on this week's episode of the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, we have Katy Purviance. Katy, how are you today?
Hello, good morning. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Wonderful. Oh, you're very welcome. And I was very excited to have you on when I knew a little bit about you. But now I've read your website, a little digging, I'm even more excited. I think we're going to have some great things to discuss. But before we get into that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, that sort of thing.
Sure, yeah. My name is Katy Purviance. I'm the founder of the Spokane Learning Co-op. I've been a teacher since 2013. I'm an English as a second language teacher. I have taught at all levels from pre-K to university in 5 different countries all around the world. And last year, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, I founded Washington State's only outdoor self-directed education center.
I love that. I've got so many questions about the co-op that we'll get to. Because as many listeners will know, I've been in public education my whole career. So I'm very excited to hear about, you decided one day you wanted to become a teacher. I'd love for you to talk us through that journey, kind of from that moment to teaching abroad in lots of different countries. I managed to find, I think, 3 of them on your website.
Okay.
So would love to hear a little bit about your educational journey.
Sure. Well, my educational journey really got started in grad school. I was an architecture student at Harvard, and it was a really big deal for me to be there. I'm a first generation college student, let alone the Ivy League, let alone grad school. Like, it was a really big deal for me to get
Right,
it.
that's huge. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I just fell in love with architecture. I got my undergrad degree in microbiology. I just did not have a lot of guidance or role models growing up as far as higher education or what a career might look like. And so I was really pioneering the path for myself. The internet did not exist at the time. So I was just kind of flying blind and trying my best with what I had. And so once I got to Harvard, it felt so good to be there and so good to be around all the other people who were there. But really, I kind of hated it. I hated it was 20 required classes. I had no choices in my classes. I had no choices in my projects. I had no choices in who my professors were. It was multiple all-nighters every week. It was just it was not only so much work, but if I look at what my vision for myself was as an architect and what we were doing at school, they were completely different things. There was no overlap.
Right.
And so I'm like, what is happening? Right? Like, I'm not sleeping, I'm overworking, I'm stressed out. I doubled my student loan debt in 1 year. I'm like, what is this? I don't remember what I Googled, but something like, why is school like this? Right? That was the moment that changed my life. I found John Taylor Gatto.
Mhm.
I found his blog, and at the time he was working on his magnum opus, The Underground History of American Education. And so at the time, what became that book was just simply blog post on his blog. And I felt like I found somebody who understood, somebody who had seen the man behind the curtain and was here to tell us all about it.
I love that.
So every morning I started at the beginning, every morning I'd read a chapter, I'd post it on Facebook, and then I'd go to Harvard to spend my like 20 hours there or whatever. Um, it took about a month before all of my Facebook or all of my teacher friends on Facebook unfriended me. And I'm like, what? What is that about? Like, why don't you want to know about the origins of your profession? Why aren't you asking these questions too? Right? So I ended up dropping out of Harvard after that first year. It was a 4-year program, so I was there for the first year. And that summer, I read like 40 books on education. Like I became addicted and obsessed to learning about how learning works. Like what is learning? How does it actually work? Um, and I'm still down that rabbit hole. That was 2009. I'm still down that rabbit hole. So that's how I got my start in education.
That's just fascinating. And then what took you from that moment of just being, in your words, obsessed and consuming all this to going abroad and teaching English? What was that step like?
Oh boy. So I did not become a teacher right away. I had no interest in becoming a teacher. I
Right.
had no interest in working in the school system. Like I was starting from reading all these books, I started to think about like what I could do next because I was so interested in it, right? And I was thinking like, oh, it would be cool to have some kind of group, like some kind of cohort situation where we're learning about learning together. Like that really interested in me. I was looking at maybe I could start a blog about what I was learning. Like I guess I was in a teacher role, like thinking about how I could teach what I have just learned, right? How I could share this with other people. So I was in that mindset right away, but I was not interested in actually becoming a teacher.
Right.
Um, so it was several years, like I ended up becoming a Girl Scout leader, which
Right.
kind of like a step towards becoming a teacher. And I still
Mm-hmm.
know this becoming a teacher. But this was in Vancouver, Washington, and I had the largest and fastest growing troop in our city. Like I had brownies, um, what is it? Daisies, brownies. No, 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 no. Brownies, juniors, and cadets, right? So like elementary
Right.
school, high school girls, I had 18 of them all in one room working together. And it was the most magical thing ever, seeing how having kids of mixed ages, how they work together and how much healthier and sane that was than keeping them divided by ages, like in the school system. So I was starting to get little hints about like what works and what doesn't work. Um, and then what was it? Some time went by and I started teaching online. Like I heard about teaching. Oh, wait, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Edit that part out.
No, you're fine.
All right. Oh my gosh. Um, I got to a point where I really wanted to travel. I wanted to see
Right.
more of the world. I had been in the Peace Corps in West Africa right out of college. So it was my first teaching experience. I was a biology teacher for seventh graders in French. So that was my very first teaching experience.
Wow, that's a huge
Yeah.
step, a huge leap of faith to do that.
That was back in the year 2001, right? And that was a very different, like who I was as a teacher in that moment was very different from the teacher I became because I had no background in teaching at that point, right? I just finished my
Right.
biology degree and was thinking about working in a lab or something. And so I was just kind of doing what I was told without asking
Right.
about it, right? And so I started really missing being abroad. Like I had had other international experiences. I once worked aboard a merchant marine training ship where we spent 3 months at sea and visited different countries along the way. And I think once you get the itch to travel, you can't turn it off. Once you
Yeah, I would agree. I don't really know anyone who has traveled extensively and then just kind of gone, nah, I'm done now. It just
get
doesn't really
into it,
happen. Yes.
it becomes who you are. So I've now been to 24 countries. I've lived in
Nice.
8 of them and I've taught in 5 of them. I miss it. I miss it so much. But yeah, I got to the point where I wanted to leave this country and expand my horizons and see other countries. And so I decided, and keep in mind at this point, I still wasn't like, oh my gosh, I love being a teacher. I was not even there yet. I was really fueled by a desire to go see other countries and other cultures and to leave this
Right.
one, right? And so I thought a really good way to do that is to get paid to do that. And a really good way to get paid to do that is to become an English as a second language teacher, right? So I went to Vermont. I went to the School for International Training, which was the original Peace Corps training site. I got
Right.
my degree. I did my internship in Poland. And then right after I graduated, I got my first job in Oman teaching English at a college in a small town.
That's just the second guest in a row. Last week's guest, Ollie, spent some time in Oman. I know of Oman, and I've watched a couple of television shows about it. But it's a very small place. Not too many people go there, so it's really interesting to have two people in a row who have been to Oman.
That's really interesting. I highly recommend it. Omanis are such friendly, good people. Like, please go. Everyone should go to Oman.
That was how it came up. Ollie has traveled and worked extensively around the world, and it came up as one of his, I think he said, top three places in the entire world to visit because of the people.
So friendly, so
Yeah,
kind.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a great coincidence. So yeah, we can't talk highly enough about Oman.
Yes, yes. Um, so what else? I just kept traveling, right? I took some, here's where I started. Oh, I've not gone deep into this part of the story in a while. And so
Right.
I love being there. I love the people, but the school system was not my cup of tea, right? Um, and so I took a little time. I traveled to Vietnam just because, like, I just spent some time travel, like you do.
As you do. Yes.
Yeah. And I wound up back in Portland, Oregon. And then I started teaching Chinese kids online, and that really changed my life. Like I was really doing it because I knew I could do it, and money is nice to have, right? So I
Right.
started waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to teach kids in China. And after about a month of this, I was like, I love this so much. I want to move to China and do this in person, right? And so that fall, I moved to Shanghai. I got a job at a bilingual school. And yeah, I was a second grade classroom teacher.
That I'd love to hear. China fascinates me. I've never been. My dad has been. Some friends have been. Some friends in education have been. How was your experience there?
I love it. I loved it and I love it. I miss it every
Wonderful.
day. Um, my life was totally different there than it is in the States. Um,
Right.
here's I think the best way to say it is that in China, I could afford to live as a teacher. And here in the United States, I cannot.
Right. Yep.
That,
That's a
that's
very common thread.
right
Yes.
there. So foreign teachers in China, on top of your salary, we got an extra $1,000 a month out pay for living expenses, the health care, and I had insurance. It wasn't socialized healthcare, universal healthcare, or any of the things we dream about here. It was insurance, but everything was covered. Same day appointments. I didn't pay anything. If
Right.
I was sick, I got to go get taken care of. The end. There was no stress. It was so easy. I had survivor's guilt for how good it was compared to how it is here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, the insurance costs are certainly in the school district that I have just left. I mean, they're just, I'm thankful for my time with the district that I just left. And it's still an incredible district and it's kind of out of their control a bit. But I feel so bad for the teachers still there. The health costs are just, especially if they're trying to cover their family,
Mhm.
are astronomical. I mean, it's not just expensive, it's prohibitively expensive for many, many people. And it's like, what a crying shame that is. It's just terrible.
Yeah. And there's so many other examples I could give, like how much cheaper transportation costs are, how much
Hmm.
cheaper food costs are, how much cheaper living expenses are. Like all the day-to-day things you need to just survive are just so much more accessible there than here. And that was in a mega city, 25 million people, the world's longest subway system. Like it is organized. And my plan going into China was I had started the process of getting my teaching license.
Mm-hmm.
I had my graduate degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And so I thought like, okay, I'll actually get my teaching license and maybe I'll just go from country to country every few years and work at international schools. That sounded like a really good life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was very similar to when I first entered the Peace Corps. I thought, okay, every 2 years I'll just live in a different country, and that sounds like a really good life. But I got really, really sick in Burkina Faso, so I ended up not carrying through that plan. So it felt like picking up that thread again of being an international person.
Right. I love that. Somebody I spoke to in season one who was a student teacher across the hall from me 10 years ago, maybe now. It sounds just like such a similar path. She wanted to travel. She loved to teach. So as taught in China and Estonia, she taught in the States for a year, is now in Peru. Is
Mhm.
just combining and she loves teaching. But it's a bonus of teaching is it's a great tool to see the world.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it
absolutely.
really is.
Yeah.
I suspect she's not done traveling and teaching and will bounce around the world, and I'm encouraging her to write a book
Oh,
when she's done. But I've got to say something that jumped out at me. If I could wave my magic wand and suddenly I was in charge of all education, the not dividing by age is something that I suspect we'll get to when we dig into your co-op a little bit more.
yeah.
But I've, the things that that really drive me about education, I would love to see an elementary school, and I'm sure they exist. I've just not been to them, where it's almost like a house system, where it's like kindergarten to fifth grade in one hallway, and those students, children, teachers work together, and you're pairing the older students to read with the younger students, and a lot more of that. The little I've seen, it seems like a really good idea.
It is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Well, have you heard of Summerhill in the UK?
Somehow I know of it. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know much about it. Being from the UK, it's a familiar name.
Summerhill is my number one influence. I read
Okay.
several books about Summerhill that summer of 2009, and I'm rereading one of them now. And it's so cool to be rereading it after all these years and to see how much it influenced my ideas about education and how much it influenced what I ended up creating. So one thing I didn't touch on, I touched on like kind of point A to point B, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't touch on how I fell in love with teaching. And that was really at
Yeah.
my, like I loved learning about learning as part of my graduate school program. But it was
Right.
really during my internship in Poland where I'm like, this is the best thing ever to get to work with young people and for all of us to grow together and for all of us to be a little
Right.
bit smarter together. I teach sitting down in a circle with my students. It's very communal and community minded. And it just lights me up in a way that nothing else did. And so it's so funny to me to think like I had zero interest in becoming a teacher. And it turned out to be the very best, like my truest vocation.
Isn't that funny? It happens. And I think, as you said, you can kind of pinpoint these little moments that come and they grab you when you least expect it. And you're like, suddenly, this is what I want to spend. This is going to be my life's work,
Yes.
is this. And I think there's something really beautiful about that when you don't necessarily go hunting for it and find it, but it comes and finds you. And often those moments are found in education when you're sitting on a carpet in the morning with a bunch of 6-year-olds talking and you're like, this is it. This
Yeah.
is what my life is going to be about. And it's a beautiful thing. I love that you had that experience.
So,
So you said, tell us a little more about it.
okay, okay. Um, so I got to a point. And I
Hmm.
want to say it was a gradual understanding. Of course, I was fueled and informed by all the books I had read and the ideas I was developing about education. And I came to this point where, kind of like my hero, John Taylor Gatto, I realized that what learning is and what school does are two completely different things.
Hmm.
So John Taylor Gatto, he was a New York City school teacher for 30 years. He won New York City Teacher of the Year, New York State Teacher of the Year. And he writes about how he was just doing his job. He was just doing what was expected of him. He didn't go above and beyond. And he didn't shortchange the students either. He just did what he was supposed to do. And he got to a point in his career where he realized that just by doing what he was supposed to do as a classroom teacher, he was hurting his students.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started asking, what is this? Just like I did at Harvard, like why is school like this? And this sent him on this journey. He went back and looked at the Boston Public Library in the archives to find the original minutes from the original School of or Board of Education. And he paints a very dour picture of the original intentions behind our public school system. Like if we go all the way back, what he was able to find is that the origins of our public school system has its origins in Prussia, what we now call Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Soldiers, excuse me, soldiers would be running into war, right? The first soldiers in a line of offense in a war situation. And then as whoever they're fighting against is firing on them, they would make the very sane and reasonable and human decision to turn around and run away and save their lives. Well, you can't win a war like that. So the generals were like, what do we do? How do we make them fight our wars for us? And what they came up with was starting when they're young. Make them more afraid of disobedience than they are of death.
That's fascinating. And this is the kind of stuff that I just find so interesting and how far back a lot of this goes. Um, it just so I'm currently working on my dissertation, and something that I've been digging into is simply the word play, because education in ancient Greece, a lot of it was based in play, and just the meaning of the word, and we've gotten away from it in some ways. So education was, yeah, rooted in play, which when we go to a theater and we see a play, we sometimes think that that word has a different meaning than a child playing with blocks on the ground, but actually it's the same thing. It's like your imagination when you press, showing my age, when you press play on a CD player, on your MP3 player, even on your iPhone, you're pressing play because it's that creative element coming out. And again, I'm not even scratching the surface, but it's so interesting how far back a lot of what we do in education today goes.
No, it is fascinating. He describes some very heartbreaking, dark moments
Hmm.
in the history of education about how it is and how it has always been a means of control.
I used to, and I suspect this is, I don't want to put, words in their mouths, but your friends who you said, once you told them you're reading this book, sort of unfriended you. When I was started in education, I used to sort of push back to a lot of that and think it's just nonsense. And I'm not saying it's too broad of a conversation to have a sweeping statement like it's all true or it's not true. But you've got to be open to these conversations, and whether you agree or disagree in the end, that's fine, but have the conversations. I think is crucial for educators to question what is education about? What are we doing here? And maybe we're doing great things, but maybe there's some things to be improved. And I think if we open ourselves up to just thinking about these things that you've brought up, it's going to do nothing but serve ourselves and our children better.
Yes.
Yeah. In my humble opinion, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you get from there? Now, a co-op. I'm kind of glad that I don't know exactly what it is. What my preconception of a co-op is families who are homeschooling their children, getting together and learning together. That's kind of about all I know. So I suspect that's probably true, but there's going to be a lot more to it than that.
That
So,
is
so
true.
I'd
Yeah,
love for you to tell me what a co-op is, and then we'll get into yours specifically.
sure. So I should say I myself went to a co-op preschool to date myself in the 70s.
Right.
So I have memories of being in an outdoor space with lots of other parents around and lots of other parents being there to help. And nobody was the teacher. I was not aware. I have no memory of who the teacher was, but I do have memories of lots of parents being around and lots of parents helping. So it had this feel of a village. And that is what I'm trying to create in my co-op, a feeling of a village. Um, so we do have lots of parents around. We have lots of different kinds of families around. And the idea is that the one thing that unifies us all is we believe in self-directed education. And I can get a little bit more into that now. We'll put a bookmark in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like we have three different weekly gatherings, and one has kids who are very young, like under the age of 5. So for kids who are very young like that, the parents stay the whole time and they are there on site and they are present and they are interacting with each other's kids, right? It's that I've replicated my own preschool experience in a way, except we have a lot more mud and paint here at my co-op than I did in preschool. And then our next age group, we have kids who are like mostly what we would say elementary school age. So ages like
Mm-hmm.
5 to 12, they're all together. And once a kid reaches the age of 5, we allow for drop off, but we ask parents to stay once a month so that they can still be part of our community and get to know the kids and the kids can get to know them. We cook outdoors with the kids, so parents will take turns leading the cooking and serving. And we treat the adults just like we treat the kids, right? It's very equal. Um, like everyone calls each other by their first name. We don't say Miss this or Mr. that or anything, right? It's just very non-hierarchical. And then our oldest group, we have a teen group. The kids in that group are between 10 and 17 years old. And they also cook, but they take charge of the cooking much more than the parents do, right? They take on more responsibilities because they're able to and because they want to.
Right. I find
So
this, I've got some sort of parallels. 2 years ago, I went up to, I had a conference I was going to in New York City. So I went to New Jersey and visited a private school that I thought was a fascinating place. Um, and the basics of it, it was built with every classroom had an indoor and an outdoor space. So one wall of the inside classroom was all glass with a glass door to go to the outdoor learning space that led it then to the communal playground and things. But even at, 5, 6 years old, these children were the ones in charge of actually growing the vegetables, learning when they were ripe or ready, and then picking them and taking them to the kitchen. Now they had, a staff to cook and prepare the meals, but it was that almost emotional investment in
mhm,
this is the food that we are eating, we have grown, learning how to not waste the food.
love it.
So very, I mean, the very important things that unfortunately sometimes gets pushed out of education. But it sounds like even though it was a private school, it had very sort of similar goals of making sure the children know the food that you're talking about really jumps out at me. Knowing where this comes from. It doesn't just miraculously appear on your plate. And I'd be curious to know sorry, I'm now taking over and I apologize. All these thoughts are coming into my head when you're talking. When I was in public education in a K-5 school, we would take our kids to a science camp every year, which is one of my favorite things to do for many reasons, and I won't get into all of them now. But one of the things I love was they really talked about food waste because a lot of these kids where I taught didn't have a lot of extra food at home.
Yeah.
The idea was you grab all the food you can. It was that sort of environment they were often living in. So when they had this buffet of food available to them, they would fill up multiple plates. They couldn't eat and it went to waste. So it became a competition that they had a bucket or a bowl or something in the middle of the table. They would scoop the remaining food into, and the table that had the least was the winner. And they were brought up on the stage and it was a big deal. So everyone wanted to win. And of course, the idea behind it was only you take as much as you want, but only take what you can eat. We're
Yes.
not wasting food. So I
Right.
love the fact that halfway across the country in a completely different environment, I'm sure that conversation has happened too about being invested in the food we're eating.
Very much so, very much so. We're all guilty of having eyes bigger than our stomachs. I am
Hmm.
certainly guilty of that as well. And yeah, we see that with our kids, and we try to remind them like you can have seconds,
Yes.
but take what you know you can eat now, And then if you want more, you can have more, but don't take more than you can eat now. And it's the same conversation with paint. You can have more
I,
paint, but use up the paint that you squirted out first before you add on more paint.
I was literally just thinking again as you were talking, it's all about the food, but then it's not about the food. It's about life. I mean, we can transfer these lessons we're talking about to paint, to anything else, to
Yeah.
purchasing a home. Do you
Yeah.
need,
You need,
the biggest you can possibly buy? All I just it's I think the possibilities of this lesson are endless.
yeah.
So so you have how many families would you say are involved in your co-op?
Let me think. We've got just over 30 some kids.
Okay.
So, and some of them have siblings and some don't. So I don't, like off the top of my head, I don't know how many families, but
Oh,
just
I
over,
was just trying to picture if this was 5 children or 100 children. Okay, you know what we're looking at.
yeah.
And is it based where you live, or does it kind of move around, or how does a co-op kind of work?
We, there's different models.
Okay.
There are some co-ops I know of, like the idea of a homeschool co-op is a very, very common. I'm certainly not the only homeschool co-op in Spokane. There are many. And there are some who will meet at different parks every time. So we are very lucky. It took me 8 months to find our site, but we are renting 10 acres of land just north of the city, just outside of
Oh,
city limits.
wow.
We rent it from a church who owns the land. And so on the land, we've got our little house. It's like a 12 by 16 foot little house. That's our arts and crafts studio and our library and some storage space. We have an adjoining carport just for a roof. We've got a picnic table underneath. We've got a big kitchen cabinet under there. We do our cooking there. We have a propane oven and stove combo and a propane tank. So all of our cooking is done right there. We have our check-in meetings and our rules meetings right at the picnic table. We have an adventure playground. We've got a 9 foot tall straw bale pyramid. We've got large scale building materials and pallets and work gloves. The kids like making their own forts and houses and villages and all that. We've got a glorious mud puddle where they lakes and rivers and bridges and tunnels and villages, and it's just so magical and it's different every day.
I was just, yeah, it's going to just keep their attention. And I'm sure we'll have people listening who this is piquing their interest. So I hope you don't mind me asking about this, but when you say you rent it, does that mean that all the families involved chip in? Does the church help you? Like, how does the sort of the nuts and bolts of this work for people who are, like I said, there's a light going off in their head thinking this sounds wonderful.
So for families who are interested in joining us, we do charge a reasonable monthly tuition
Of
rate.
course. Right.
We have different prices for whether you're really little and your mom and dad is there the entire time versus a higher price if your parents are dropping you off. If you do like multiple days a week, like a couple of kids do, like we give you a little bit of a, a discount
Right.
for multiple days. So that's what that looks like.
Okay, that's sort of the model. That's why I was just curious because I know
Yeah.
we'll have listeners who go, well, how does this work? And I love the fact that, that you found an existing sort of site in a church that's willing to help you guys out, I'm sure, and provide a home for you guys. That just, again, sounds idyllic.
We are very thankful for this land. It's so nice. It's kind of perfect. It's just outside of city limits. You don't hear any traffic noise where we're at. The back of the property where we are, it's kind of lined with evergreen trees. White-tailed deer go by, the wild turkeys go by. We see quail. We saw a porcupine once up in a
Really?
tree, and I realized I had never seen a porcupine in real life, and I wasn't sure at first what it was. I'm like, what is that, right? So that was a lot of fun for all of us to just stand around and talk about it and think about what it was trying to do and all of that.
I love it. For those who have not been, I've been to Seattle. And then actually just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was went to a festival, an outdoors festival. It's on the Columbia River Gorge, so right on the Washington and Oregon border. I mean, I already knew that the scenery up there is stunning, but man alive, is it beautiful. It truly is. So that just, feeds my soul even more for this sounding. What a great place for kids to be growing up.
It is so beautiful. And I've been to every state. Washington is my favorite state. Like I feel so lucky to live in my favorite state.
I love that. I'm not far behind you. I think I've done 45.
Yeah.
And Washington, I mean, it is something special for those people who have not been there. Just absolutely wonderful. Um, so where do you see this, like your work going? I'm assuming just from talking to you that you're not thinking, oh, we've peaked. This is it. The co-op's going to stay like this forever. Where do you hope it might go in 5 years, in 10 years?
Yeah, so this is just phase one. Uh,
Right.
my intention for us to be a full-time K through 12 school. And in Washington, what that means is being approved by the state to become, we would be a private school. There are two other self-directed approved schools in the state of Washington. They're both near Seattle, of course.
Mm-hmm.
They were the very first people I called when I realized that I was going to start my school in Spokane. I called them up. I said, how do you do it? How do you do self-directed education and meet the requirements of the state? And they both do it a little bit differently, but they both do it. And that
Right.
was my green light to go ahead. Once I knew that it was possible, that somebody else had already paved the way, that two other people had already paved the way, I knew that I could do it too. Earlier this year, I got to drive out there and visit both of them and spend a couple of days at both of them and just see what was my biggest takeaway is that if we look at self-directed education as an umbrella term, there are different ways of doing it. So it was so helpful for me to see two very different ways of doing it. And then I also know other people who lead agile learning centers or Sudbury schools. These are also under the umbrella of self-directed education. So in the time that I started this journey till now, I've had many conversations with people around the country who are like, how do you do it? There's so many different ways it can be done. And so I've been able to pull inspiration from all of these. But of course, my biggest